My son died over a year ago in a horrific car accident. Since then, every single month I've been sending $1,000 to my daughter-in-law to help her clear their debts. Until one Saturday morning at the farmer's market, a delivery driver abruptly blocked my path. He pressed a package into my hands and whispered, "This is from your son. Watch it alone." I froze, then sped straight back to my workshop. But when I tore it open, what was inside made my blood run cold. This story won't leave you unchanged. Before we dive in, drop a quick comment for me. Have you ever had to fight for someone you love when everyone told you to give up? Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to read. Just a note, some details have been adjusted for storytelling and reflection. What matters most is the lesson this carries. My son had been dead for 22 months when a delivery driver I'd known for 4 years pressed a package into my hands and told me I needed to watch what was inside alone. It was Saturday morning at the Ashland Farmers Market, the kind of May Day that made you believe Oregon knew what it was doing with all that rain. At 58, I'd been a carpenter for 35 years, and the smell of sawdust had become the only comfort I knew after Alice died. These market trips were ritual, now coffee from the stand near the entrance, maple syrup from the Patterson farm, maybe fresh bread if the line wasn't too long. Familiar motions to fill the hours that stretched too wide since I'd lost both my wife and my son within 6 weeks of each other. I was reaching for my wallet at the coffee stand when I saw him. Hugo Ross, the 32-year-old driver who delivered lumber to my workshop twice monthly, approaching through the crowd with a package and fear in his pale face. "Mr. Henderson." His voice came out wrong tight like he'd been holding his breath. "Hugo?" I took my coffee from the vendor and turned. "Didn't expect to see you here. Thought you were on the North Route Saturdays." He glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. The package in his hands was brown paper, maybe 6 inches square, unremarkable, except for the way his knuckles were white around it. "I need to give you this." He pressed it into my hands before I could set down the coffee. "You need to watch it, alone." I looked down at the package, then at his face. We'd known each other 4 years, professional friendly, the kind of relationship built on reliable deliveries and small talk about wood grain. I'd never seen him scared before. Hugo, what is this?" "It's about your son." His eyes darted past me again, scanning the market crowd. "I can't. I have a family, Mr. Henderson. Just watch it, please." "My son is dead." The words came out flat automatic. 22 months of saying them hadn't made them feel more real. "Just watch it." He was already backing away, hands up, like I might try to return the package. "I'm sorry. I couldn't not. I'm sorry." He disappeared into the Saturday crowd before I could stop him, leaving me standing with cooling coffee in one hand and a mysterious package in the other. Around me, the market continued, vendors calling out prices, children laughing near the face painting booth, someone's dog barking at a balloon. Normal. Everything normal, except the way my heart had started hammering against my ribs. I walked back to my truck without buying the maple syrup. The drive from Ashland to my workshop took 20 minutes on a good day. I made it in 18, barely registering the turns. The package sat on the passenger seat where I'd dropped it, innocuous brown paper, concealing whatever had put that terror in Hugo's eyes. "About your son. Soren had died in July 2023. A car accident, his wife Anwin had said when she called. He'd been driving too fast on a wet road outside Portland, lost control, hit a tree. Closed casket funeral. I hadn't seen his body. The death certificate had been signed by a doctor I'd never heard of, out of a county 2 hours from Portland. But grief doesn't ask questions. I hadn't thought to ask any. Anwin said it was better that way, better to remember him as he'd been, and I'd been too hollowed out by Alice's death 6 weeks earlier to argue. How many Saturday mornings had I spent here, moving through the same motions, believing the same lie? I pulled into the workshop's gravel lot and sat for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. The building Alice and I had built 40 years ago looked exactly as it always did. Cedar siding, weathered silver morning light catching the windows, the hand-carved sign I'd made when Soren was 10 still hanging above the door, Henderson Family Carpentry. Family, that word used to mean something. Inside, sawdust motes drifted through the sunlight. I set the package on my workbench oak, 40 years old, scarred by 10,000 cuts, and still solid. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against the wood until they steadied. The paper tore easily. Inside 3 items, a USB drive, a handwritten letter folded into thirds, and a photograph face down. I picked up the photograph first. Soren stared back at me. Not the Soren I'd last seen 3 years ago, healthy and laughing at Finn's 4th birthday party. This Soren was gaunt cheekbones, sharp under skin that looked like it hadn't seen sun in months. His hair was longer than he'd ever worn it tangled. His eyes, God, his eyes looked like he'd learned things he'd never wanted to know. He was standing behind institutional bars, green-painted metal institutional white walls behind them. In his hands, held up at chest level, like a prisoner in a ransom photo, was a newspaper, the Medford Mail Tribune. The date was visible in the top right corner, printed clear and unmistakable, March 14th, 2025. 6 weeks ago. My son hadn't died in July 2023. The photograph slipped from my fingers, landed face up on the workbench. I stared at it at Soren's face at the newspaper date at the bars that put him somewhere between where I stood and wherever the hell Anwin had told me he'd been buried. 22 months. I'd spent 22 months believing my son was dead, going to a grave marker that probably didn't even have him under it, telling my 5-year-old grandson that his daddy was in heaven with Grandma Alice. My hands found the workbench edge and gripped. Soren was alive. Soren was imprisoned. And someone had made absolutely certain I would never think to look for him. I picked up the photograph again, with hands that no longer shook. The fear had burned off, replaced by something colder and infinitely more useful. I looked at the USB drive sitting beside it, and the letter folded beneath. Hugo's handwriting on the envelope, shaky but legible. I'm sorry it took this long. The date on that newspaper was March 14th. Soren hadn't died in the car accident Anwin described 22 months ago. He'd never left Oregon at all, and the letter in my hands would tell me exactly where my son had been all this time and who put him there. I set the photograph face down on the workbench and reached for Hugo's letter. The handwriting was shaky blue ink on plain paper. Mr. Henderson, I work for Quick Ship Deliveries. For the past year, I've been making runs to a facility outside Salem Pinewood Care Center, my hands pressed flat against the oak. 3 weeks ago, I was dropping off supplies at the loading dock. While waiting for the signature, I saw a man through one of the secured wing windows. He looked at me with recognition, not of me personally, but of the outside world itself, like a prisoner who'd forgotten what freedom looked like. I kept reading. It took me 2 days to place his face. You'd been on my delivery route for 4 years. I'd seen the photographs in your workshop, you and your son, at job sites, both covered in sawdust. The man behind that window was older, thinner, but it was him. Hugo Ross had a family to protect, and he'd handed me this package anyway, knowing what it might cost him. I started asking careful questions. The letter continued. Deliveries to places like Pinewood, you learn to keep your mouth shut, but there's always someone who'll talk. I found his name on the patient roster, Soren Henderson. Legal guardian Anwin Cooper. Admission date July 15th, 2023. The date I'd gotten the phone call. Anwin crying. Soren's car on a wet road. Gone. I looked you up in old receipts. Almost called a dozen times. But I have a wife, 2 kids. The supervisor at Pinewood made it clear that employees who talk about patients find themselves in legal trouble. HIPAA violations. The kind that ruins lives. But your son looked at me through that window, and I knew someone had to do something. The letter ended. The USB drive has copies of what I could access. I'm sorry it took this long. Destroy this after you read it. No signature. Smart. I picked up the USB drive. Alice had given me this laptop 3 years ago, so I could email Soren when he traveled for work. The machine took a minute to boot up dust on the keyboard. The drive contained 7 files. I opened the first. Patient intake form. Pinewood Care Center. Patient name, Henderson Soren Michael. Date of admission, July 15th, 2023. Legal guardian, Anwin Cooper, relationship spouse. Admitting diagnosis, severe traumatic brain injury with cognitive impairment requiring full guardianship. Physician signature, Cedric Price, M.D. I read it twice, then opened the next file. The second file, billing records. Monthly care cost $18,500. I did the math. 22 months, over $400,000. But that wasn't all. My eyes blurred as I looked at a separate ledger. Under my name, Anwin had been pocketing the additional $1,000 I painstakingly sent her every single month from my carpentry earnings, thinking it was clearing Soren's post-mortem debts. She was bleeding both my son's inheritance and my own survival dry. The third file, visiting restrictions. Patient 2, 347, Henderson requires guardian pre-approval for all visitors. Current approved visitors, Anwen Cooper. No exceptions without guardian written consent. How many times had I looked at this laptop and thought of all the emails I never got to send? I closed it and walked to the window. Alice had loved Robin's built 3 nesting boxes around the property. She'd died 2 years ago in June. And 6 weeks later, Anwen had called with news of another death that had never actually happened. The sound of tires on gravel made me turn. Anwen Cooper arrived at the workshop Sunday morning with 5-year-old Finn, her expression carefully arranged into concerned exhaustion, the devoted widow managing alone. She was 35, blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing casual clothes that looked effortless, but probably weren't. Lawrence. Her voice carried that brightness people use when asking for something. I'm so sorry to drop by unannounced. Finn ran to me before I could respond, clutching the wooden toy truck I'd made for Soren 30 years ago, innocent and unchanged by the lies surrounding him. Fuck, Grandpa. He wrapped himself around my leg. Mom says I can stay with you today. I picked him up and met Anwen's eyes over his head. Everything all right? Work emergency. I wouldn't ask, but my sitter is sick, and I thought, well, Finn loves being here. Not a problem. I set Finn down near the scrap wood bin. You know you can always bring him. You're a lifesaver. She glanced around the workshop that casual sweet people do when looking for something specific but pretending they're not. It's been too long since I was here. Soren used to... She stopped, pressed a hand to her mouth. Nearly perfect. Anyway, she recovered. I'll be back in a few hours. Oh, Lawrence, while I'm thinking about it. I'm sorting through some of Soren's old insurance matters. Did Alice keep copies of property records? Maybe in her desk. I'm trying to track down documentation for Finn's future, and I can look, I said, voice level. Haven't gone through most of Alice's papers yet. No rush. Her smile was warm, sympathetic. I know it's hard. Take your time. She kissed Finn's head and left. I stood in the workshop doorway watching her sedan disappear down the gravel drive. Alice's documents, property records, asked with just enough casualness to seem like an afterthought, but landing with enough precision to tell me exactly what Anwen was actually doing. She was searching for something, and after 22 months, she still hadn't found it. Alice had always told me she kept important things in a safe place. For 2 years, I'd overlooked the small key in her desk drawer, thinking it was just another piece of accumulated life. Now, I pulled open that drawer and found it brass, worn smooth, with a number stamped on the head, 347. Tomorrow morning, I would go to the bank and see exactly what my wife had hidden away. Monday morning arrived too fast, and I stood before Umpqua Bank at 9 sharp, clutching the small brass key I'd found in Alice's desk drawer, a key I'd forgotten about, until Anwen's question reminded me it existed. Rebecca Winters, the young bank clerk with a kind smile, looked up from her computer as I approached. I set the key on the marble counter. I need to access a safety deposit box. She read the number stamped on the brass. Box 347. May I see your identification? I handed over my driver's license. She typed, then looked up. Mr. Henderson, I have you verified as authorized. Box 347 was registered to Alice Henderson in February 2023. As her spouse and executor, you have full access. February 2023, 5 months before Alice passed, 4 months before Anwen told me Soren died. Rebecca's expression shifted to sympathy. I'm very sorry for your loss. If you'll follow me, she led me through a heavy vault door down a corridor lined with metal boxes. A key forgotten for 2 years, hidden in plain sight in the desk, where Alice kept birthday cards and shopping lists. Rebecca stopped at box 347, inserted her master key, waited for me to insert mine. The box slid out smoothly, heavier than I expected. She carried it to a small viewing room, 4 walls, 1 table, 1 chair. Take your time, sir. Press the call button when you're finished. The door closed, and I was alone with whatever Alice had hidden away. I lifted the lid. 3 items inside. First, a legal document bound in blue Henderson Family Trust Confidential. I turned to the signature page. March 12th, 2023. Alice's signature in her careful script. Below it, Arthur Long, attorney at law. March 2023. Alice died in June. She'd created this 3 months before. Second, copies of our property deeds, the workshop, the land we'd bought 40 years ago. Everything organized, indexed, protected. Third, a sealed envelope, cream paper, Alice's handwriting, for Lawrence. If you're reading this, I'm gone. My hands trembled. The seal was wax-pressed with her old stamp and oak tree. Alice had always been 3 steps ahead, packed lunches the night before, started Christmas shopping in July, kept spare keys hidden where only those who truly knew her would look. And I broke the seal. The letter inside was dated December 8th, 2022, 7 months before she died, 8 months before Anwin told me Soren was dead. My dearest Lawrence, it began, and I had to stop press my hand against my eyes until I could see clearly. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I pray you never needed to find it. But I've learned in 60 years that hope is wonderful, and preparation is better. That was Alice Practical even from beyond the grave. I've noticed things about Anwin. Small at first lies about where she's been, the way she watches Soren like someone calculating value, not sharing life. I've seen her with bank statements when Soren's not looking. I've watched her smile at our son and seen something cold behind her eyes. I kept reading. I could be wrong. God knows I hope I'm wrong. But I've been married to you long enough to know the difference between paranoia and pattern recognition. So I went to see Arthur Long in January. We created the Henderson Family Trust. The trust document sat beside the letter. I glanced at it, then back to Alice's words. Everything we built, the workshop, the land, the savings, it's all protected now. If anything happens to Soren, if Anwin tries to control his assets or ours, the trust prevents it. The workshop stays in trust for Soren and Finn, managed by you. She can't touch it. She can't sell it. She can't use it as leverage. My throat felt tight. Arthur has the master documents. He knows everything I know. If you're reading this and something's gone wrong, go to him. Trust him. He's a good man, and he'll help you. The letter continued, Alice's handwriting growing less steady, like she'd been crying. I wish I could be there to help you fight whatever's coming. I wish I could see Finn grow up, watch Soren build his own life, grow old with you in the workshop where we started. But if I've learned anything in our 40 years together, it's this: you're stronger than you know, Lawrence Henderson. You're steady when others panic. You're kind when others harden. And you never give up on the people you love. The final paragraph was short. A fight for our son Lawrence. Don't trust obvious answers. Question everything that seems too simple, too tragic, too final. And know that wherever I am, I'm proud of you. All my love, Alice. I sat in that small bank room, Alice's letter in my hands, and felt something break open inside my chest. My wife had known somehow she'd sensed the danger before any of us, and she'd tried to protect us from beyond the grave. The trust document beside me was dated March 2023, signed by Alice and witnessed by Arthur Long. Arthur Long, the attorney Alice had trusted with her suspicions, her preparations. I pressed the call button. When Rebecca opened the door, I was gathering the documents. I need to make copies of everything, I said, and I need Arthur Long's office address. She smiled gently. I can help with the copies. Mr. Long has an office on Main Street in Medford. He's very well regarded. I know, I said, holding up the trust document. He worked with my wife. I left the bank 20 minutes later with copies secured in my truck and the originals back in the box 347. Alice's letter was folded in my shirt pocket, resting against my heart where it belonged. Arthur Long's office was 30 minutes away. I needed to understand exactly what Alice had put in place and how I could use it to bring my son home. Arthur Long, 65 and silver-haired, had been the Henderson family attorney since before Soren was born, and he looked at Alice's trust document with the calm authority of someone who knew exactly what it meant. He read the signature page, then Alice's letter, then set both on his desk. Alice came to me 3 years ago, he said quietly, right after her diagnosis. She was worried about something but wouldn't say exactly what, just that she needed to protect Soren and the assets you'd built together. This was February 2023's, under Ellingstedts February 14th. Arthur opened a planner, showed me the entry. The trust was finalized March 12th. March 2023, Alice died in June. Anwin told me Soren died in July. How had Alice known to prepare legal protections 3 months before she died? 5 months before Anwin made her move. Can Anwin contest this trust? I asked. Arthur shook his head. She can try, but Alice was of sound mind when she created it, and we have medical records to prove it. The trust supersedes everything. Anwin has no legal access to Henderson assets. The workshop, the land, your savings, all protected for Soren and Finn with you as trustee. Arthur's expression hardened. Guardianship fraud is a federal felony, but the court needs evidence stronger than videos and suspicion. We need proof from inside that facility. medical records showing he doesn't require guardianship testimony from staff documentation of the fraud. He pulled a business card from his desk drawer. Clifford Myers, Private Investigations, former Ashland Police Department, 25 years on the force, retired 5 years ago. If anyone can get the proof we need, it's him. I looked at the card and felt recognition wash over me. Clifford Myers. I've known him since we were in school together. Arthur smiled faintly. Then you know he's thorough? Call him tonight. Tell him I sent you. His smile faded. And Lawrence, these people are dangerous. Be very careful. I left as the sun was setting. Clifford's card in my pocket beside Alice's letter. Clifford Myers. I'd known him since 3rd grade, back when we'd traded baseball cards in the schoolyard and believed good always won. I called from my truck. He answered on the 2nd ring. Myers. Clifford, it's Lawrence Henderson. Arthur Long gave me your card. The pause. Lawrence, what's Arthur got you into? My son's alive. His wife has him imprisoned in a care facility and told me he died 2 years ago. I need proof that will hold up in court. Another pause longer. Where are you? Outside Arthur's office. Go home. I'll be there after dark. Don't turn on more lights than usual. The line went dead. Clifford Myers arrived at the workshop 3 hours later, moving across the gravel lot with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to watch for danger. He was 60 now, gray-haired and lean, wearing dark clothes that blended with shadows. I swept your property before knocking, he said quietly. No bugs I could find, but assume you're being watched anyway. He walked through the workshop, reading it, noticing dust patterns, tool placements, the way things had been moved and replaced. Then he stopped at Alice's desk. This is where you found the bank key. Yes. Where's your security system? I don't have one. You had one. He pointed at the ceiling beam. Old camera mount, painted over, but still there. Where's the recording unit? Memory stirred. 20 years ago, after a break-in down the road, Alice insisted, but the company went out of business. Where's the unit? I led him to the storage closet. Behind boxes of sandpaper, the old gray box was still mounted to the wall, dusty and forgotten. Clifford pulled it down, examined it. Still powered, still recording to internal memory, probably on a loop. He looked at me. You have a laptop? The first clip was dated March 2024. The workshop door opened. Anwin stepped inside, looked around, then walked straight to Alice's desk. She has a key, I said. She's not stealing, Clifford observed. She's searching. Watch. Anwin opened each drawer methodically, photographed documents with her phone, replaced everything carefully. 40 minutes at that desk, then left. The second clip, May 2024. Same pattern. 3rd July 2024. 4th September 2024. 5th December 2024. 6th February 2025. Clifford leaned back, expression grim. This proves premeditation, breaking and entering multiple counts. But, Lawrence, if she's this desperate to find that trust, and she realizes you have it now, she'll escalate. Yes. I stared at the frozen image on the screen, Anwin rifling through Alice's desk, hunting for the document that would have given her everything. The trust that sat in box 347 the entire time 2 miles away, untouchable. What's the next layer? I asked. Clifford closed the laptop. Tomorrow I start digging into Pinewood. Who runs it? Who profits? How many others are trapped there? This isn't just about your family anymore. He left the way he'd come, a shadow disappearing into darkness. I sat alone in the workshop, watching the 6th video, one more time, Anwin searching my dead wife's desk for the secret that would destroy her. Clifford called Tuesday morning before sunrise. Can you come to my office? I found something about Pinewood that changes the scope of what we're facing. I was dressed and out the door in 10 minutes. His office sat above a hardware store on Ashland's main street, 2 rooms that smelled like coffee and old paper. Clifford was already at his desk, surrounded by printouts and notes, looking like he hadn't slept. Elaine Stewart, he said, without preamble, sliding a printed photograph across the desk. Local investigative journalist for the Rogue Valley Tribune. 43 years old, award-winning reporter, specialized in financial fraud and institutional corruption. I looked at the photo, a woman with sharp eyes and a determined smile standing in front of the courthouse. In November 2024, she published an expose on Pinewood Care Center, billing irregularities, suspicious guardianship patterns, patients with families who couldn't visit without permission, from guardians who had financial incentive to keep them isolated. Good journalism, solid research. Clifford pulled up another document on his laptop, turned it toward me, a newspaper webpage with a 404 error. The article disappeared from the Tribune's website 48 hours after publication. Editor claimed technical issues promised it would be back up. Never was. Elaine told friends she'd been warned to drop it, wouldn't say by whom. My hands had gone cold. What happened to her? December 19th, 2024. Single vehicle crash on I-5 southbound 2 in the morning. Her car went off the road at high speed, hit a tree. She survived barely. Critical condition for 3 weeks. Brain injury, multiple surgeries. Was it? Police ruled it driver fatigue. Case is technically still open, but no active investigation. Clifford's voice was flat professional, but his eyes were hard. A journalist asks questions, her article vanishes, and 2 weeks later, she's fighting for her life on a hospital bed. I sat back in the chair, understanding settling into my bones like winter cold. This isn't just Anwin. No, this is institutional. Pinewood has protections, legal, financial, maybe political. They've been operating for at least 3 years that I can document. Your son isn't the only one trapped there. And when someone threatens to expose it, they don't just threaten back, they eliminate the threat. I thought about Hugo Ross, terrified in the farmer's market, pressing that package into my hands and running. Hugo, I've been keeping an eye on him. So far he's untouched, but he was smart to stay anonymous. You and I aren't anonymous anymore. For the first time since opening Hugo's package, I felt real fear, not the shock of discovering Soren was alive, but cold, understanding that good people helping me could pay the price. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I didn't know. Clifford shook his head. I've handled dangerous cases before. Domestic violence situations where the abuser was connected. Drug trafficking with gang protection. I know what I'm getting into. The question is whether you're ready for this. I looked at the photograph of Elaine Stewart, at her confident smile that had preceded her near death by 6 weeks. They have my son. I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. You could walk away, let Soren stay where he is, protect yourself. Could you, if it was your son? Clifford smiled faintly. No, which is why I'm still here. He closed the laptop. But understand this gets worse before it gets better. They know someone's asking questions. They'll move to protect themselves. He was right. Wednesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop. This is the only time. I stared at it for a long moment, then forwarded it to Clifford without responding. He texted back immediately. Don't engage. Save everything. 3 hours later, Anwin's sedan pulled into the workshop lot. I watched through the window as she got out with Finn, carrying a manila folder, her expression arranged into concerned family. Lawrence. She smiled as I opened the door, Finn running past her to examine the scrap wood bin. I hope you don't mind us dropping by. I have some paperwork I need you to look at. She set the folder on my workbench, pulled out several forms. It's just routine medical information update for the insurance coordination. Since we're both listed on Finn's coverage through Soren's old employer, they need updated authorizations. Could you sign here? She pointed to signature lines on 3 different pages, pen already in hand. Every instinct Alice had ever taught me about reading people went off like alarms. The casualness was too studied. The urgency beneath the smile was too visible. I'll have Arthur review these first, I said, picking up the folder without opening it. Anwin's face stiffened for half a second before recovering. Of course, though they're just standard forms, nothing complicated. I'm sure, but Arthur handles all my legal paperwork now. Alice set it up that way. Her eyes flickered at Alice's name. That's very thorough of you. When do you think? I'll get them back to you once Arthur's reviewed them. She held my gaze for a moment, then smiled again. Perfect. No rush. She called Finn, kissed his head when he protested leaving, and walked back to her car with the same careful composure. I watched her drive away, then immediately scanned the documents and emailed them to Arthur with a message. Anwin brought these. Says they're insurance forms. Something's wrong. He called back 20 minutes later. Don't sign those. Do not sign those under any circumstances. What are they? The top 2 pages are legitimate insurance coordination, harmless. The 3rd page is psychiatric record authorization, disguised as medical information release. If you signed it, you'd be giving her lawyers access to your complete mental health records. They're building an incompetency case against you, Lawrence. I sat down heavily on the workbench stool. To do what? To declare you legally incapable of managing your own affairs. The same thing she did to Soren. If she succeeds, she'd be appointed your guardian and she'd control everything. The trust, the workshop, your ability to make legal decisions. You couldn't fight for Soren because you'd have no legal standing. I looked at the scanned papers on my phone screen, innocuous forms with deadly implications hidden in legal language. She couldn't find the trust document, I said slowly. She couldn't get me to sign away my psychiatric records, so now she's choosing a third option, rendering me legally incapable of making any decisions at all. Yes, Arthur said quietly. And Lawrence, this means she's going to file soon, probably within days. The competency petition will come, and when it does, we'll have very little time to prepare a defense. The knock came at 8 a.m. Thursday morning, 2 days after I'd refused to sign Anwin's papers, and the courier standing at my workshop door held an envelope with Jackson County Circuit Court, stamped across the seal. Lawrence Henderson. He held out a clipboard. Sign here, please. Legal document from Jackson County Circuit Court. I signed. The envelope felt heavier than paper had any right to be. He left without another word, his van disappearing down the gravel drive, while I stood in the workshop doorway holding what I already knew would change everything. An envelope with a court seal delivered at dawn can change everything in the time it takes to tear paper. I walked to my workbench, the same oak surface where I'd opened Hugo's package 9 days ago, and broke the seal. Petition for competency evaluation, filed by Anwin Cooper, case number stamped in black ink. Hearing date 3 weeks from today. And I made myself read every word. Petitioner Anwin Cooper requests this court determine that Lawrence Henderson, age 58, is unable to manage his own affairs due to severe post-traumatic stress disorder following the loss of his child. Evidence demonstrates clear paranoia and delusional thinking, as Mr. Henderson repeatedly asserts that his child who died in a motor vehicle accident 22 months prior is still alive. She'd done it. She'd weaponized the truth. I kept reading. Mr. Henderson exhibits danger to himself through increasing forgetfulness, missed appointments, paranoid accusations against family members, and persistent confusion about dates and events. Medical records from his primary care physician note concerning behavioral changes over the past 6 months, including expressed beliefs that contradict documented facts of his son's death. My doctor, the one who'd asked how I was doing at my annual checkup in February when I'd been distracted thinking about Alice's death anniversary. The notes about grief twisted into evidence of decline. The petition continued for 3 more pages. Testimony from Anwin about my behavior, claiming I'd become reclusive, stopped attending church, regularly spent hours talking to myself in the workshop. All of it plausible to someone who didn't know the truth. All of it explainable by grief or by the slow discovery that my son had been imprisoned by his own wife. How do you prove you're not insane when the evidence of your sanity, your son being alive, is the very thing they're calling a delusion? The final paragraph made my blood go cold. Petitioner requests this court appoint a guardian to manage Mr. Henderson's affairs, including, but not limited to, financial decisions, property management, and medical care. Petitioner, as sole remaining family member with legal standing, offers to serve in this capacity. She wanted to become my guardian. I set the petition down and picked up my phone. Arthur answered on the first ring. It arrived, I said. A pause. I was hoping she'd wait longer. Give us time to prepare. She's escalating because she's worried this petition is aggressive. She's claiming I'm delusional for believing Soren is alive, using the fake death she created as proof I've lost my mind. I know. Arthur's voice was grim. It's elegant in a terrible way. The truth becomes your enemy. Lawrence, listen to me carefully. If you lose this hearing, meaning everything changes. Anwin will be appointed your legal guardian. She'll control the workshop, your finances, every decision you make. You'll need her permission for medical care, to sign contracts, to access your own bank accounts. Like Soren. Exactly like Soren. And once she has guardianship, she'll immediately move to contest the trust. She'll argue Alice created it while dying, that she manipulated you, that the trust itself proves your incompetence. With you declared unable to manage your affairs, she'll have legal standing to challenge it. I looked around the workshop, 40 years of Henderson work, the tools Alice and I had bought together, the benches Soren had learned, on the space where Finn played with toy trucks while I worked. All of it would become Anwin's to control. And Soren stays at Pinewood, I said quietly. Yes, because you'd have no legal authority to challenge his guardianship. You'd be a ward yourself, unable to file petitions or hire attorneys or make any legal claims on your own behalf. She'd have won completely, both father and son under her control, unable to fight back, unable to even communicate without her permission. I pressed my hand flat against the workbench, feeling the solid oak under my palm. Alice had helped me choose this wood in 1985. We'd built this space together, raised Soren here, taught him everything we knew about craftsmanship and honesty and doing right by people. 3 weeks, I said. 3 weeks until the hearing. We need 2 things, Lawrence. First, we need to prove you're completely competent. That means medical evaluation and testimony from people who know you, evidence that you're managing your life and property responsibly. I'll handle that. And second, we need to prove that Soren's guardianship was fraudulent. Because if we can show the court that your son really is being held illegally at Pinewood, that he was never incompetent, that Anwen fabricated everything, then your belief that he's alive isn't a delusion. It's the truth, and everything she's built falls apart. How do we prove that in 3 weeks? Arthur was quiet for a moment. Clifford needs to get inside Pinewood. We need medical records showing Soren doesn't require guardianship. We need testimony from staff who've seen him. We need documentation of the fraud. And we need it fast, because this petition means Anwen knows we're moving against her. She's going to be watching everything. She's trying to silence me before I can expose her. Yes, the same way she silenced Soren, the same way they silenced Elaine Stewart. But Lawrence, this time, we know it's coming. This time, we have warning. That's our advantage. I looked down at the petition again, at Anwen's signature at the bottom, neat and composed, at the hearing date 3 weeks away, at the words that would make me a prisoner if I couldn't prove what I knew to be true. Tell Clifford, I said. Tell him the countdown started. I hung up and sat at the workbench in the morning light. The petition spread before me like a map of everything I stood to lose. 3 weeks to prove I was sane. 3 weeks to prove my son was alive and imprisoned. 3 weeks to stop Anwen from doing to me exactly what she'd already done to Soren. The clock had started running the moment I'd opened Hugo's package. Now it was counting down to 0. That weekend, 2.5 weeks before the hearing, Clifford drove to Salem and walked into Pinewood Care Center, posing as a man looking to place his elderly father. He called me Saturday evening from his car voice, tight with controlled anger. I approached Pinewood as family, considering placement, he said. Got a look at their operation from the outside, talked to some staff during their breaks off-site, bought a few beers, asked questions about what it's really like working there. I sat on the workshop stool, phone pressed to my ear. What did you find? The billing confirms what we suspected, Clifford said. $18,500 a month for care that should cost a quarter of that. Over 22 months, Lawrence. The number is as ugly as you'd expect. I didn't need him to say it out loud. I'd already done that math, and it's all legal on paper, guardian-approved charges for medically necessary care. I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just about control. This was systematic theft dressed up as healthcare. How isolated is he? I asked. Completely. No phone access without guardian approval, which Anwen never gives. No freedom of movement within the facility. Can't leave his wing. Can't have visitors without written permission. Can't make decisions about his own schedule or care. Everything goes through Dr. Cedric Price, and Price does whatever the guardian tells him to do. He's a prisoner. Yes, your son is paying prison rates for a cage, Lawrence, and that facility is profiting $14,000 a month off keeping him there. After we hung up, I sat in the workshop doing mathematics that made me feel sick. $18,500 times 22 months, $425,500. I didn't need a calculator to understand what $400,000 stolen looked like. It looked like my son's life, stolen month by month, while I believed a lie. Soren had a trust fund from his grandparents, money set aside for his future for Finn's education for emergencies. Anwen had guardian authority over Soren's assets. She'd been signing the checks every month, approving the charges, watching the account drain. And Pinewood had been billing, collecting, profiting. For 2 years, while I'd mourned my son, strangers had been making thousands of dollars monthly by keeping him imprisoned in a room he couldn't leave. I understood now why they had hurt Elaine Stewart for writing about it. I understood why Hugo had been terrified. This wasn't just one woman's fraud. This was an entire system of exploitation, protected and profitable. Sunday afternoon, Anwen dropped Finn at the workshop. She was brief, preoccupied, barely looked at me as she handed him off. "A few hours," she said. "I have errands." Finn ran inside, clutching the wooden truck I'd carved for Soren 30 years ago. He climbed onto the high stool beside my workbench, legs dangling, watching as I planed a piece of cherry for a rocking chair commission. The workshop smelled like wood shavings and varnish, familiar and safe. Finn sat quiet for a while, then spoke in that direct way children have before they learn to hide their thoughts. "Grandpa, I keep dreaming about Daddy." My hands stilled on the plane. "What kind of dreams?" "He's knocking on a door, but I can't open it. Like he's stuck somewhere and trying to get out." Finn's voice was small but clear. "Every night this week, the same dream." I set down the plane and turned to face him. "Tell me more." "He's on the other side of a door, and I can hear him knocking, but when I try to open it, it won't move, like it's locked from the outside. And he keeps knocking and knocking, but I can't help him." Finn looked at me with those 5-year-old eyes that saw more than adults gave him credit for. "Is that real? Is Daddy really stuck somewhere trying to get out?" My throat went tight. A child couldn't lie about a dream, and Finn's dream was telling him exactly what was happening to his father, knocking, trying to reach out, unable to get free. "Dreams sometimes show us things adults don't dare say directly," I said carefully. I got down from the stool and sat on the floor so we were eye level. "Your daddy loved you very much. He'd never leave you on purpose. Mom says he's gone, like Grandma Alice. I know that's what she says. But the dream feels different, like he's not gone, just stuck." I looked at this 5-year-old boy, at Soren's eyes, in a smaller face, at the way he held himself with that same quiet certainty his father had always had. And I made a promise I intended to keep, even if it meant taking on a system that had already hurt people for asking these questions. "I promise you, Finn, I will find out the truth about your father, no matter what it takes." Finn nodded seriously, sensing truth, even if he didn't understand all of it. "Okay, Grandpa." He went back to playing with his truck, pushing it across the workbench surface, making quiet engine noises. But I stayed on the floor for a moment longer, thinking about dreams and truth and 5-year-olds who knew their fathers weren't really gone. Anwen returned 3 hours later. Finn ran to her, and she kissed his head, smiled at me with that careful warmth that looked real if you didn't know better. "Thanks for watching him, Lawrence. I know you enjoy the time together." "Always," I said. She left with Finn, and I stood in the workshop doorway watching them drive away. A 5-year-old child having the same dream every night about his father trying to get out. A father imprisoned in a facility billing $400,000 for a cage. A widow filing competency papers to silence the one person still asking questions. I'd made a promise to my grandson, and the system was about to find out that promises to children were the kind you kept no matter how many people with money and power stood in the way. The promise I'd made to Finn felt heavier 3 nights later when I noticed the dark sedan parked 50 meters from my workshop engine, running, no one getting out, just sitting there in the darkness. First night I thought it was someone making a phone call. People run their engines for heat on cold June nights. I noted it at 11 p.m. when I locked up, saw it still there at 11:30. Second night, same car, same position, same idling engine. Not a coincidence. Third night, I called Clifford before locking up. "There's a car outside my workshop the last 3 nights. Dark sedan, 50 meters down. Engine running every time." "I stay inside," he said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He arrived with headlights off, circled wide, read the license plate, then came back. Short-term rental, Shell LLC, no traceable owner. This is intimidation, Lawrence. If they wanted to act, they already would have. They want you to know you're being watched, want you to feel pressure, want you to back down. I looked out at the car, at the exhaust visible in cold air, at whoever was monitoring my workshop. Someone was watching my home for 3 consecutive nights, and I knew exactly why I was asking the questions that had put a journalist in the hospital. "They've got the wrong person," I said quietly. Clifford looked at me with something like approval. "I figured, but understand this escalates from here. Surveillance threats, then action. Elaine Stewart's article disappeared, then her car went off the road 2 weeks later. How long do I have?" "Until the hearing, probably. After that, depends on what you do next." The car was still there when Clifford left. Still there when I went to bed. Still there at 2 a.m. Gone by sunrise. The 4th night I stood at the workshop window at 11 p.m., looking at the empty street. The car disappeared on the 4th night, and that's when I truly understood fear. Not the threat you can see, but the one watching from somewhere you can't. 3 nights visible surveillance, now invisible again, which meant they'd made their point, or they were moving to the next phase. My phone rang at 11:15. Clifford. I need you to meet me, now. Safeway parking lot on Siskiyou. Come alone lights off when you pull in. Someone wants to talk, but she won't if there's any chance she was followed. I drove with headlights off the last 2 blocks, pulled into the empty lot, found Clifford's car in the back corner. Another car beside it, a woman in the driver's seat. I parked and walked over. Clifford was standing between vehicles. Lawrence, this is Saskia Brennan. She's a nurse who worked at Pinewood until 2 weeks ago. Saskia Brennan, 34 years old, with dark circles under her eyes, looked at me through her car window with the expression of someone who'd made a terrifying decision. I can't testify, she said, immediately, voice tight. I have a daughter. I'm a single parent. I saw what happened to that journalist who asked questions about Pinewood. I understand, I said. But I made copies before I left. She held up a USB drive. Your son's chart, all 22 months. My hand was steady as I took it. What's on it? The truth. Every week I did cognitive assessment standard protocol. Your son communicates clearly. He's well-oriented. He knows who he is, where he is, what year it is. He asks questions, reads books, remembers conversations. Fully aware. She looked at me with intensity that cut through the fear. But Dr. Cedric Price signs off on severe cognitive impairment every single report. Contradicts everything in the nurse notes. Every assessment I documented showing normal function he overrides with diagnosis of incapacity. For 22 months. I felt cold settle into my bones. Systematic fraud. Coordinated fraud. The doctor, the guardian, the facility administration. They're billing for specialized care he doesn't need, keeping him isolated under medical justification that doesn't exist. And I wasn't the only nurse who noticed, but I'm the only one who kept copies. Why, I asked quietly. Because I have a son too. And if someone did this to him, I'd hope someone would help. She started her engine. I can't testify. If they find out I gave you those records, I'll lose my license at minimum. But you need to know your son is being held prisoner under false medical documentation. That's not care. That's imprisonment. She drove away quickly, taillights disappearing. Clifford and I stood in the empty lot, the USB drive in my palm. 22 months of medical records, he said. Every nurse assessment showing Soren is lucid. Every Price signature falsifying incapacity. This proves systematic medical fraud. I looked at the small plastic drive evidence a stranger woman with a daughter had risked everything to give me. She can't testify, I said. They hurt the journalist. She knows they'll hurt her too. But she gave us the proof anyway. I closed my hand around it. 22 months of records. Somewhere in those files was documentation of my son being aware, being conscious, being imprisoned, while doctors lied on forms and guardians collected checks. Somewhere in those 22 months was proof that Soren had been trying to reach me all along, and they'd stopped him at every turn. 10 days until the hearing, Clifford said. We need to get you in a room with Soren before then. You need to see him face to face, get him to tell you directly what happened. Because right now, we have documentation, but what we need is your son's voice. I looked at the USB drive, then up at the empty parking lot, where a frightened nurse had just handed me the key to dismantling everything Anwen had built. How do we arrange that? I asked. We don't, Clifford said. We wait. The court will request family connection documentation as part of the competency proceedings standard procedure. When that happens, Anwen will have no choice but to arrange a video call, and she'll use it to try to prove to the court that your belief in Soren being alive is a delusion. That's when you'll see the truth. The drive contained medical assessments, billing records, facility logs. But buried in a subfolder labeled Communications, intercepted were 3 scanned files, all handwritten letters, all addressed to Dad. The first was dated June 14th, 2023, less than a month after Anwen told me Soren was dead. Soren's handwriting filled the page, familiar slant, the same script Alice taught him in 3rd grade. Dad, I don't understand what's happening. They say I need to be here, but I feel fine. Anwen says it's temporary until I'm better, but I don't know what I'm supposed to be getting better from. I miss the workshop. I miss you. Tell Finn I love him. Soren. At the bottom, stamped in red ink, communication suspended per guardian instructions. Patient not authorized for outside correspondence. Dr. C. Price. 3 letters, 3 attempts to reach me, 3 times. His words were stopped and filed away like they'd never been written. The second letter, January 8th, 2024. 7 months into his imprisonment. Dad, it's been 6 months since I've seen you or Finn. They won't tell me why I can't have visitors. Anwin says you're too busy with the workshop, but that doesn't sound like you. Do you still have that old hand plane we worked on when I was 12? Sometimes I try to remember the smell of sawdust so I don't forget who I am. Please, if you get this, come find me. Soren. Same red stamp, same notation, same blockade. The third letter, August 19th, 2024. 9 months ago. Dad, if you ever read this, and I know you probably won't, because they've never sent the others, I need you to know I never stopped trying to reach you. I know I'm conscious. I know my mind works. I know this isn't right. They tell me I'm confused, but I remember everything. I remember you teaching me to measure twice and cut once. I remember Mom's laugh. I remember Finn's first steps. Please don't forget me. Even if they convinced you I died, I'm here. I'm still here. Your son, Soren. Please don't forget me. As if I could ever forget my son. As if the 22 months of grief hadn't been carved into every day since Anwin told me he was gone. I sat at the workbench reading those 3 letters until I had them memorized. June confusion, January desperation, August resignation. I forwarded the files to Arthur and Clifford. Proof of systematic communication blockade. 3 letters all intercepted. 14 months. Arthur called 5 minutes later. This proves Soren was lucid the entire time Dr. Price was documenting severe impairment. But what we really need is to get you face-to-face with Soren. If the judge sees him communicate clearly, how Anwin controls all access. She'll arrange it herself. Watch. 2 days later, 8 days before the hearing, Anwin called. Lawrence, the court requested family connection documentation. I'm setting up a video call with Soren tomorrow evening. Bring Finn. 6 p.m. at my house. She hung up before I could respond. The next evening, I drove to Anwin's house with Finn. Her living room was carefully staged family photos on the mantle, the performance of normalcy. She set up the laptop at 6 p.m. The call connected. Soren appeared on screen. He was thinner than in Hugo's photograph. Tired, but his eyes were bright and clear, and when he saw Finn, his whole face transformed. "Hey, buddy," he said, voice steady. "How's school?" "Daddy?" Finn pressed close to the screen. "Grandpa taught me to use the small hammer." "That's wonderful. Your grandpa is the best teacher there is." Every word lucid, every response appropriate, every moment proving Dr. Price had been lying for 22 months. "How are you doing, Dad?" Soren looked at me through the screen, and I saw recognition, intelligence, awareness. "Keeping busy at the workshop," I said, carefully aware of Anwin monitoring. "Working on a rocking chair commission, oak and cherry, like that one we built together." "I remember that one. We spent 3 weeks on the joinery." 4 weeks, but you were right about the grain direction." Soren smiled faintly. Anwin glanced at her phone, distracted, and in that moment, Soren looked directly into the camera and winked. Once. Pause 1 second. Twice. Pause 1 second. 3 times. 3 winks, 1 second apart. Exactly the signal I'd taught him when he was 9 years old, a secret code for "I'm okay, but I need help" that we'd use during camping trips when he wanted me to rescue him from boring adult conversations. My face stayed neutral, but my heart hammered. 26 years later, my son was using that same signal from a prison he'd been trapped in for 22 months. He was telling me he was still there, still conscious, still waiting. The call lasted 15 minutes. Anwin recorded everything for court documentation. She had no idea that in those 15 minutes, Soren had confirmed everything that he recognized me, that he was fully aware that he was waiting for rescue. When we left, Finn asked why Daddy looked sad. "He misses you," I said, "but he'll be home soon." "Promise?" "Promise." That night I called Arthur. I saw him. He's completely lucid, and he used our signal. He remembers. "Can you prove the signal's significance?" I taught it to him when he was 9. It's in old home videos. Alice documented everything. I find those videos because in 8 days you're walking into court and we're going to prove your son is exactly as aware as those letters show. 8 days turned to 3, and Clifford's call came at 6 in the morning, and the tone of his voice before he said a word told me something had gone wrong. "Lawrence, it's Hugo Ross. Single vehicle accident on Highway 26 last night. He's in critical condition." I sat down on the workbench, stool phone pressed to my ear. "What happened?" "His truck lost control around midnight, veered off the road, hit a tree. Police are calling it driver fatigue." "What do you think it was?" Clifford was quiet for a moment. "The road was straight. Weather was clear. Hugo's been driving that route twice a month for 4 years. He knows every curve, every grade, every place where the road narrows. I close my eyes. What about you, Arthur Saskia? We're being careful. But Lawrence, you need to understand what you're walking into. This isn't just a family dispute anymore. This is a system that protects itself by making problems disappear. I can't stop now. Soren is waiting. I know, but I needed you to understand the risk. After we hung up, I sat in the workshop alone, processing the pattern. A journalist asks questions, she ends up in the hospital. A delivery driver brings evidence, he ends up in the hospital. And tomorrow, I walk into court with that same evidence. The fear wasn't for myself. I'd lived 58 years, raised a son, built a business with Alice, and I'd die knowing I tried to save Soren. But Clifford was investigating. Arthur was representing me. Saskia had given me medical records. How many people helping me would they hurt before this ended? But Soren had used our signal, 3 winks, 1 second apart. I'm okay, but I need help. And I'd promised Finn his father would come home. I didn't have a choice. The day passed in slow preparation. Arthur called twice with strategy updates. Clifford checked in at noon, reporting no new developments. I worked on the rocking chair commission because my hands needed something to do, and Alice had always said idle worry was wasted energy. Night fell. Tomorrow morning, at 9 a.m., I'd walk into Jackson County Circuit Court and either prove I was competent to manage my own life or become Anwin's ward. I was sitting at the workbench reviewing evidence files when Arthur called at 10 p.m. Lawrence, I need to tell you something. His voice was heavy. Anwin's lawyers are filing a motion to suppress the 6 workshop camera videos. Prior notification law, the cameras were installed without informing anyone they were being recorded. It's a technicality, but it's solid. My hand tightened on the phone. Those videos show her breaking in, show her searching for the trust. Yes, I know, but if the judge agrees with the motion, they're out. And without them, we have Hugo's USB. Hugo can't testify. He's unconscious. It's Saskia's USB. She won't testify publicly. She's terrified, Lawrence, and she has a daughter to protect. The medical records are useful, but without her to authenticate them to explain what they mean. Soren's intercepted letters, which prove attempt to communicate but don't prove fraudulent diagnosis on their own. Lawrence, I'm not saying we've lost. I'm saying we're facing real challenges. I need you to prepare for the possibility that I lose. Arthur was silent. Oh, that Anwin becomes my guardian, I continued. That she controls the workshop, the trust, everything. That Soren stays at Pinewood indefinitely. That I spend whatever time I have left under her authority, unable to make decisions, unable to fight back. Yes, I sat in the dark workshop, hand resting on the oak table, where Alice had worked beside me for 40 years. The wood was smooth under my palm, worn by decades of use, solid and real. I understand, I said quietly. Thank you for being honest. I'm not giving up, Lawrence, but I won't lie to you about where we stand. We hung up. I sat alone in the darkness, thinking about 3 weeks of evidence gathering, of Clifford's investigation, of Saskia's courage, of Hugo's sacrifice. All of it potentially insufficient because of legal technicalities and convenient accidents. I'd almost accepted the possibility of losing, of Anwin winning, of Soren staying at Pinewood, of becoming her ward myself, when the phone rang again. Clifford's voice steady and calm, the way it always was when he'd found something crucial. Lawrence, I have something. I stood up from the workbench. What? Can't explain on the phone? I'm 5 minutes away. Don't turn on more lights than you already have. I'll come in through the back. The line went dead. I waited in the semi-darkness, every minute stretching longer than it should. Headlights swept the gravel drive off immediately. A car door closed softly. Footsteps on the back stairs. Clifford came in through the workshop's rear entrance carrying something in his hand. In the dim light, I could see it was a phone, his phone. I was at the courthouse this afternoon, he said without preamble, finalizing paperwork for tomorrow. Anwin was there with her attorney standing in the 3rd-floor hallway by the elevators. They didn't see me. I was around the corner. He held up the phone. Oregon is a one-party consent state. I was present in that public hallway. Legally, I could record. What did you record? Anwin talking to her lawyer about Hugo being hospitalized, about the nurse being too scared to testify, about the camera videos being thrown out on technicality. Clifford's expression was grim, and then she said, "Tomorrow he's declared incompetent, and I control everything. I've waited long enough." My breath caught. I have her confession, Lawrence. Her exact words, her exact intent, recorded legally in a public courthouse hallway. This changes everything. 20 minutes after Clifford's call, I heard his truck pull up outside the workshop. And when he walked through the door, he was carrying his phone like it held something more valuable than gold. "Play it for me," I said. He shook his head. "Context first. You need to understand how this happened." I sat on the workbench stool, waited. "I was at the courthouse this afternoon." Clifford began setting his phone on the oak surface between us. "Filing paperwork for Arthur witness lists, evidence logs, procedural documents for tomorrow's hearing. Standard legal work, nothing unusual." He paused, and I recognized the careful way he was building the timeline, the cop's instinct for establishing facts in proper sequence. I was on the 3rd floor by the elevators when I saw Anwen coming out of her lawyer's office. She had someone with her, young guy, maybe 30, carrying a briefcase. Assistant lawyer or paralegal. They were talking as they walked toward the stairs, and they were being louder than they should have been in a public courthouse hallway. Clifford had been at the courthouse filing papers, routine legal work, and happened to be standing in exactly the right hallway at exactly the right moment to hear exactly the wrong thing. "My instincts kicked in," he continued. 25 years as a cop, you learn to recognize when people are saying things they shouldn't say in public. So I turned on my phone's voice recorder and kept walking toward the water fountain, about 20 feet from where they were standing. "Oregon is a one-party consent state," I said. "Yes, legal to record when you're present in the listening area," which I was. Public courthouse hallway, plenty of people around me standing in plain sight getting water. Completely legal. "What did you get?" Clifford's expression was calm, but his eyes were bright. "Everything." He picked up the phone, pressed play, and turned the volume up. Static first. Background noise. People talking in the distance, footsteps, the ambient sound of a busy courthouse. Then Anwen's voice, clear and unmistakable. "Throwing out those camera videos tomorrow. My lawyers found the notification statute. He never told anyone those cameras were recording. It's a slam dunk suppression. A male voice, younger than uncertain, and the USB evidence. Hugo's in the hospital. Can't testify to chain of custody, can't authenticate the documents. Without him, it's just files that could have come from anywhere." "What about the nurse?" Anwen laughed, sharp, impatient. "That nurse is too scared to testify. I saw what happened to the journalist who asked questions. She saw it too. She won't risk her career or her daughter." The younger voice again. "So tomorrow, that old father will have nothing left to prove. No videos, no witnesses, no evidence. Judge will see he's claiming his dead son is alive with no credible proof, and she'll declare him incompetent. I'll be appointed guardian, and I'll have full control of everything. The workshop, the trust Alice set up, all the assets. Everything. I've waited long enough." Anwen's voice through the phone speaker, impatient and entitled, admitting what she'd never say in court. "You're sure this is the right approach?" The assistant lawyer, still uncertain. "I've waited long enough for this. Alice dies. Then Soren conveniently has his accident, and that trust she created was supposed to protect everything from me. But if the old man is my ward, I contest the trust as created under duress. And meanwhile, Soren stays exactly where he is, paying top dollar monthly for his cage, while Dr. Price keeps signing the forms. It's been 2 years. I'm done waiting." Footsteps, the sound of a door opening, voices fading. Clifford turned off the recording. The workshop was silent. Outside, the Oregon night was dark and still. Inside, Anwen's voice still seemed to hang in the air, her confession, her impatience, her calculated cruelty laid out in sentences recorded in a public hallway. "Okay," I said quietly. Clifford waited. "Oregon one-party consent," I continued. "You were in that hallway. It's completely legal." "Yes." She admitted Hugo's in the hospital, admitted the nurse is scared, admitted planning to contest Alice's trust once I'm her ward, admitted Soren is at Pinewood, paying monthly while Dr. Price signs forms. "Yes." I looked down at my hands, carpenter's hands scarred from 40 years of work, steady, despite everything that had happened in the past 3 weeks. I thought about Hugo fighting for his life after delivering evidence, about Saskia too terrified to testify, but giving me records anyway, about Alice planning protections from beyond the grave, about Soren using our childhood signal through a video screen, all of it leading to this moment. Anwen's own voice recorded by chance in a courthouse hallway, confessing everything. "We have what we need," I said. Clifford nodded. "Arthur needs to hear this tonight. He'll adjust strategy for tomorrow, play this early, establish that Anwen's been manipulating the entire situation. Her lawyers can't suppress it. It's legal, It's authentic, and it's devastating. When does court start? 9 a.m. Arthur wants us there at 8:30. I stood up from the workbench, the same oak surface where I'd opened Hugo's package 3 weeks ago, where I'd read Alice's letter from the bank vault, where I'd examined Saskia's USB drive, where an hour ago I'd nearly accepted the possibility of losing everything. Now I stood here understanding we'd already won, not because of perfect planning or brilliant strategy, but because Anwen had finally said the truth out loud in a public hallway where Clifford happened to be standing. Tomorrow morning, the judge hears that recording, I said, and then what? And then everything changes. Because once Judge Gomez hears Anwen admit she knows about Hugo's hospitalization, knows about witness intimidation plans to contest Alice's trust through guardianship manipulation, the competency hearing becomes irrelevant. You're not the one on trial anymore. Clifford picked up his phone, the small device that contained the evidence that would dismantle 22 months of lies. Get some sleep if you can, he said. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. He left through the back door the way he'd come. I stood alone in the workshop, thinking about tomorrow morning, not as a man fighting for survival, not as someone desperate to prove his sanity, but as a father coming to take his son home. The morning of the hearing arrived cold and clear, and I drove to Jackson County Courthouse at 8:45, with Arthur beside me and Clifford's recording on my phone in my pocket. We met Clifford at the courthouse steps. He nodded once, said nothing, walked with us through the heavy doors into the building, where Anwen had confessed her scheme yesterday afternoon, without knowing anyone was listening. The courtroom was designed to intimidate high ceilings wood paneling that absorbed sound and made every word feel permanent fluorescent lights washing everything pale. Anwen sat across the aisle with 3 lawyers all dressed impeccably. She wore navy blue expression, carefully arranged as the concerned daughter-in-law forced to make difficult decisions about a declining father figure. I sat at the defense table with Arthur. My hands, 35 years of planing, mortising, joining wood, rested on the wooden bench. Steady, ready. Arthur leaned close, whispered, "Remember, calm, steady. Let the evidence speak. That's what it's designed to do." At 9 o'clock sharp, the bailiff called, "All rise." Judge Beverly Gomez, 62, with steel-gray hair pulled back and eyes that missed nothing, ascended to the bench with the calm authority of someone who'd seen every courtroom game. She settled into her chair, looked across the room with a gaze that measured everyone it touched, and spoke. "We're here on the matter of competency petition filed by Anwen Cooper regarding Lawrence Henderson. Counsel proceed." Anwen's lead attorney, 50-something expensive suit, practiced concern, stood and began his opening statement. Lawrence Henderson, 58 years old, suffering from grief-induced trauma following the loss of his son and wife within weeks of each other, exhibiting clear signs of mental decline, making unrealistic claims requiring protection for his own well-being. Anwen Cooper, as sole remaining family with legal standing, reluctantly but necessarily seeking guardianship. I listened to my life reduced to bullet points supporting incompetency. Arthur took notes. Judge Gomez watched me while the lawyer spoke, her expression neutral but attentive. I met her gaze and held it, letting her see whatever she needed to see. Before I tell you what Dr. Cedric Price said on that witness stand, are you still with me? Comment A, if you think a doctor's word will stand, or B, if you think evidence beats authority, and tell me why in one short reason. Please note, what follows includes some recreated details for narrative purposes, but the lesson behind it is what matters. Anwen's counsel called his first witness. The petitioner calls Dr. Cedric Price. Dr. Price walked to the witness stand with the calm of someone accustomed to his word being final. 52, professionally groomed, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He was sworn in, settled into the chair, looked at Judge Gomez with professional deference. "Dr. Price?" Anwen's lawyer began, "You've been practicing psychiatry for how many years?" 23 years, specializing in geriatric psychiatry and trauma-related disorders. And you've had occasion to review materials related to Mr. Lawrence Henderson's mental state, sir? Yes. I reviewed family reports, medical records from his primary care physician, and documentation of concerning behaviors over the past several months. How do you sit still while a doctor calls your sanity into question for knowing something true, for refusing to believe a lie someone else told you? Can you describe your findings? Don't stand. Dr. Price turned slightly toward Judge Gomez, addressing her directly as if I wasn't in the room. Mr. Henderson exhibits classic grief-induced delusional disorder. Following the deaths of his wife and son within a 6-week period, he's developed a persistent fixed belief that his deceased child, who died in a motor vehicle accident 22 months ago, is still alive. I kept my face expressionless. Arthur's pen moved steadily across his legal pad. This belief, Dr. Price continued, is not a simple denial or wishful thinking. Mr. Henderson makes detailed, emotionally invested claims about his son's location, his current condition, circumstances of his supposed confinement. All of this is fabricated as a coping mechanism for unbearable loss. An Wen's lawyer nodded sympathetically. What other symptoms have you observed? Increasing social isolation, obsessive behavior, spending excessive time alone in his workshop, reportedly talking to himself, paranoid ideation regarding family members, specifically Ms. Cooper, whom he's accused of various implausible conspiracies, memory issues, disorientation about dates and events. In your professional opinion, does Mr. Henderson require assistance managing his affairs? Dr. Price looked grave. Absolutely. Without intervention, his condition will worsen. He needs someone to make decisions in his best interest, manage his finances, his property, his medical care. Guardianship isn't punishment. It's protection. Your recommendation? Guardianship under Ms. Cooper's authority. She's family, she understands his history, and she's demonstrated consistent concern for his well-being, despite his unfounded accusations against her. An Wen's lawyer turned to Judge Gomez. Thank you, doctor. No further questions at this time. Judge Gomez looked at Arthur. Cross-examination wespis one fambratis. Arthur stood slowly. Not yet, Your Honor. We'll reserve that right. He sat back down. I glanced at him, questioning. He wrote on his legal pad and turned it toward me. Let them build their case. Then we show truth. An Wen's lawyer called 2 more witnesses, her assistant lawyer testifying about my erratic behavior when she'd tried to deliver legal documents, and a clerk from the county records office testifying about my confused questions when I'd searched for death certificates. All of it building a picture-grieving old man, losing his grip on reality, believing impossible things, needing someone to take care of him. All of it true in one light, all of it false in another. Finally, An Wen's counsel rested. Judge Gomez looked at Arthur. Mr. Long, does the defense wish to present evidence? Arthur stood. Yes, Your Honor, extensive evidence. He opened his briefcase, pulled out his laptop, set it carefully on the defense table. Before this court considers Dr. Price's psychological evaluation, I'd like to address the credibility of the petitioner's claims about my client's mental state. An Wen's expression didn't change, but I saw her lawyer lean forward slightly. Arthur continued. Your Honor, I'd like to present video evidence that directly contradicts the narrative we've just heard. Arthur stood slowly, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 6 months of lies coming undone. Your Honor, before this court considers my client's capacity, I'd like to address the credibility of the petitioner's claims about his mental state. Judge Gomez leaned forward slightly. Proceed. Arthur opened his laptop, connected it to the courtroom projector. The screen behind the judge flickered to life. Your Honor, petitioner filed a motion to suppress these recordings, citing notification statute. I've submitted counter documentation showing these cameras were installed 20 years ago for security purposes, prior to any notification requirement under Oregon law, and therefore fall under the grandfathering provision. The motion fails on its face. The first video began. Date stamp, March 2024. The workshop door opened. An Wen stepped inside, looked around carefully, then walked straight to Alice's desk. The projector hummed. The courtroom went silent except for the video-audio footsteps, a drawer opening, papers rustling. An Wen rifled through the desk, methodically photographed documents with her phone, replaced everything carefully. The video ran for 6 minutes. Then the second one started. May 2024. Same pattern. I watched An Wen's face from across the courtroom. The careful composure was cracking color, draining jaw tightening. Her lawyers shuffled papers, frantically conferring in whispers. The third video played. July 2024. This time, An Wen opened wall panels, checked under floorboards, searched with the thoroughness of someone hunting for something specific. I glanced toward the gallery. Clifford sat 3 rows back, watching the screen with professional calm. When he felt my gaze, he gave a slight nod. The investigator confirming his work was landing exactly as intended. Fourth video, September 2024. An Wen removing a document from the filing cabinet, studying it, putting it back. Fifth video, December 2024. Taking a photograph off the wall, examining the back, replacing it. Sixth video, February 2025. Going through tool drawers, boxes on shelves, methodical and increasingly frustrated. Arthur stopped the playback. Ms. Cooper, you're watching yourself on these recordings. Do you dispute their authenticity? Anwin's voice came out tight. I was checking on my father-in-law's tools. He'd been acting strange. I was worried he'd hurt himself. Arthur didn't let her finish. Then why did you take documents from his filing cabinet in video 3 and a photograph from his wall in video 5? Judge Gomez spoke before Anwin could respond. Counselor, your client entered his property without permission 6 times. She removed items. This doesn't look like welfare checks. This looks like surveillance. Anwin's lawyer stood quickly. Your Honor, Ms. Cooper was acting out of genuine concern for a declining family member. She needed to assess the situation. Judge Gomez tapped her gavel once, silencing the rising murmurs. She looked at Anwin directly, and I saw the judicial neutrality giving way to something sharper. Everything I did was to protect Finn. Anwin's voice rose. Lawrence was talking about Soren like he was alive. He's not well. Arthur turned to face Judge Gomez. Your Honor, that's exactly the narrative Ms. Cooper has been building. But what if Mr. Henderson wasn't delusional? What if everything he suspected was true? The judge paused, studying me. I met her gaze, steady, focused, present. I saw the moment her assessment shifted, saw her recognize that the man sitting at the defense table didn't match Dr. Price's description of dangerous delusion. A counselor, as Judge Gomez said slowly, are you suggesting the deceased son is actually alive? I'm suggesting the court has been presented with an incomplete picture, Arthur said, and I'd like to present one final piece of evidence that clarifies everything. He pulled Clifford's phone from his briefcase, connected it to the courtroom speaker system. Exhibit L, Your Honor, recorded yesterday afternoon in this courthouse's third-floor hallway. Ms. Cooper speaking with her associate. Oregon one-party consent law. The recording party was present in the public area. Completely legal. Anwin's face went from pale to ashen. Arthur pressed play. Static first. Background noise. Then Anwin's voice clear and unmistakable, filling the courtroom. Throwing out those camera videos tomorrow, my lawyers found the notification statute. Younger male voice and the USB evidence. Hugo's in the hospital. Can't testify. That nurse is too scared I saw what happened to the journalist. She won't risk it. So tomorrow that old father will have nothing left to prove. No videos, no witnesses. Judge will see he's claiming his dead son is alive, and she'll declare him incompetent. My throat tightened hearing her calculated manipulation played out for the entire courtroom. The recording continued, Anwin's voice impatient. I'll have full control. The workshop Alice's trust everything. And Soren stays exactly where he is, paying top dollar monthly while Dr. Price keeps signing forms. It's been 2 years. I'm done waiting. The recording ended. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Judge Gomez's expression had gone from skeptical to granite hard. She looked at Anwin with the kind of gaze that ends careers. Ms. Cooper, did you just hear yourself conspiring to manipulate this court's proceedings? Anwin stood, voice shaking. That recording is out of context. I was speaking hypothetically. Save it. Judge Gomez's voice cut like steel. Mr. Long, what are you asking this court to do? Arthur straightened. Immediate dismissal of the competency petition, Your Honor. And I'm asking the court to order a state investigation into the circumstances surrounding Soren Henderson's reported death. Because based on that recording, Ms. Cooper believes he's alive and knows exactly where he is. Judge Gomez picked up her gavel. The sound when it fell was the sweetest thing I'd heard in 22 months. Petition dismissed. Mr. Henderson, you are found fully competent to manage your own affairs. She turned to Anwin. As for you, Miss Cooper, Anwin's lawyer was on his feet. Your Honor, your client just admitted on tape to witness intimidation and conspiracy to commit fraud and knowledge of a potentially falsified death certificate. Bailiff detained Ms. Cooper pending criminal investigation. The courtroom erupted. The bailiff moved toward Anwin. Her lawyers were talking over each other. Spectators in the gallery were standing craning to see. Judge Gomez banged her gavel 3 times. Order. This court is ordering the Oregon State Police to investigate the circumstances surrounding Soren Henderson's reported death. Mr. Henderson, she looked at me directly. I'm going to need you to tell me exactly where you believe your son is being held. Because as of right now, this court considers his death certificate suspect. I gave Judge Beverly Gomez the address to Pinewood Care Facility before her pen even touched the legal pad. My hand didn't shake when I wrote it down. 2,847 Riverside Drive Building, C 3rd floor. 22 months I'd been searching, and now I was handing my son's prison coordinates to a woman who had the power to bring him home. Bailiff, contact the county sheriff immediately, Judge Gomez said. I want Mr. Soren Henderson transported to this courthouse within 2 hours. Full medical escort. If anyone at that facility attempts to obstruct, they are to be arrested for contempt. I sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 4 and counted floor tiles 342 beige squares between me and the water fountain. My carpenter's hands gripped my knees, and I forced myself to breathe steadily. In 2 hours, I would know if my son still recognized me. Arthur checked his watch constantly. Saskia paced. Clifford stood guard by the courtroom door. At the 115-minute mark, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Mr. Henderson, this is Deputy Marcus Chen with the county sheriff. We have your son. We're 3 minutes out from the courthouse. He's asking for you, sir. My throat closed. Thank you. The bailiff opened the courtroom doors at exactly 2 hours and 4 minutes. Judge Gomez was already seated, and a woman I didn't recognize sat in the witness box, late 50s gray suit, wire-rimmed glasses, leather portfolio balanced on her lap. Dr. Helena Marsh, Arthur whispered. Court-appointed psychiatrist. She's excellent, completely independent. We took our seats. Anwin was brought back in by her escorts, her wrists now in handcuffs. She found my eyes across the aisle, but I looked straight ahead at the empty chair beside me. That chair wouldn't be empty much longer. Judge Gomez spoke without preamble. Dr. Marsh, you've reviewed the case materials I provided during recess. Estal. I have, Your Honor, Dr. Marsh said, her voice steady and clinical. I'm prepared to conduct an immediate evaluation. Good. Bailiff, bring in Mr. Soren Henderson. The side door opened. I stopped breathing. Soren walked into the courtroom between 2 deputies, and I barely recognized him. He'd lost at least 40 pounds. His dark hair had grown long enough to touch his shoulders, unwashed and tangled. The orange facility jumpsuit hung loose on his frame, but his eyes were clear, sharp, focused. Those were my son's eyes. He saw me immediately, and his whole face crumpled. His mouth formed my name, but no sound came out. One deputy steadied him by the elbow, but Soren's gaze never left mine. 22 months, 703 days since Anwin had stolen him. Mr. Henderson, please take a seat, Judge Gomez said gently. Soren moved to the defendant's table and sat beside me. I could smell institutional soap on his skin, see the medication tremor in his hands. He turned toward me, tears tracking down his hollow cheeks. Hey, Dad, he whispered, just that one word. I reached for his hand under the table and gripped it hard. His fingers closed around mine with desperate strength. And I'm here, I said. I'm right here, son. Dr. Marsh stood and approached. Mr. Henderson Soren, my name is Dr. Helena Marsh. I'm a psychiatrist appointed by this court. I need to ask you some questions. Is that all right? On the way Soren nodded, but didn't release my hand. For the next 38 minutes, Dr. Marsh conducted the most thorough competency evaluation I'd ever witnessed. She asked about current events, basic arithmetic, his understanding of legal proceedings, his memory of the past 2 years. She asked him to explain why he was in court, what he understood about the guardianship, whether he knew what year it was. Dr. Marsh made notes with a fountain pen, her expression neutral. Finally, she turned to Judge Gomez. Your Honor, I find no evidence of mental incompetence in Mr. Soren Henderson. He is oriented to person, place, and time. His cognitive function is intact. His affect is appropriate given his circumstances. In my professional opinion, he is fully competent to make his own medical and legal decisions. Judge Gomez nodded slowly. Mr. Soren Henderson, you are hereby released from all guardianship constraints. Bailiff, remove those facility identification bands immediately. A bailiff approached with scissors and cut the plastic bands from Soren's wrists. My son was free. Soren turned to face me fully, and I saw something in his eyes that made my chest tighten. Not just relief or gratitude, but a burning, focused rage that mirrored my own. Dad, he said quietly, his voice steady now. I know where all the documents are, every bank account, every property deed, every lie she told. I remember everything. Across the aisle, Anwin's face went white, and I realized that this trial wasn't over, it was just beginning. Judge Gomez nodded slowly. Mr. Henderson, please tell the court in your own words what happened on July 20th, 2023, and the events that followed. Soren's hand tightened around mine for one more second before he released it and sat straighter. He looked directly at the judge, not at Anwen, not at the bailiffs flanking her. My wife and I had an argument that morning, he said. His voice was steady despite the tremor still visible in his hands. About our son Finn's care, about money. Anwen wanted to send Finn to a boarding program in Vermont, expensive, exclusive, unnecessary. I said no. She was furious. He paused and I watched him swallow hard. That afternoon I was carrying laundry down the basement stairs. I remember Anwen behind me. Then I remember falling. The next thing I knew, I woke up 3 days later in a locked room at Pinewood Care Facility. Anwen visited once on the 4th day. Soren continued. She said she'd gotten emergency guardianship for my protection, that I'd had a mental breakdown, that the doctors agreed I needed long-term care. His jaw tightened. I asked for my father. She said he'd signed off on it. Emergency guardianship, secured while my son was unconscious and vulnerable, unable to contest, unable to call for help. Anwen had orchestrated his detention from the beginning. One manufactured fall, one forged signature, one stolen life. Across the courtroom, Soren's eyes found mine as he described waking alone in Pinewood, and I saw the exact moment he'd started believing he'd been abandoned, the moment Anwen's lie had taken root. I didn't believe her at first, Soren said quietly. My father and we'd rebuilt our relationship after my mother died. He wouldn't abandon me, but weeks passed, then months, no visitors, no calls. Dr. Cedric Price, the facility psychiatrist, told me my father had been contacted and declined visits. Anwen shifted in her chair between the bailiffs. Her face was pale, but her eyes were calculating, still looking for angles. I wrote letters, Soren said. 17 letters to my father over 22 months. Dr. Price told me they were mailed. They weren't. My father thought I was dead. 17 letters. I'd written my address on 17 envelopes Soren never saw. In December 2024, a nurse named Saskia Brennan told me the truth. Soren continued. She showed me the death certificate Anwen had filed. She told me my father had been searching for me, that he didn't know I was alive, that Anwen had forged my signature on financial documents and was systematically emptying my accounts. Judge Gomez's expression hadn't changed, but her pen moved steadily across her notepad. I'm not mentally ill, Your Honor, Soren said, and his voice didn't waver. I was detained so my wife could control my son and access my inheritance. The medications they gave me, antipsychotic sedatives, weren't treating illness. They were keeping me compliant, keeping me quiet. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of the court reporter's keys. Judge Gomez set down her pen. Mr. Henderson, do you understand the legal proceedings happening here today? Yes, Your Honor. And you're telling this court that you were unlawfully detained for 22 months, while your wife systematically defrauded you and your father, all. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Gomez turned her gaze to Anwen, who stared straight ahead, her face expressionless. The competency petition against Lawrence Henderson is dismissed, Judge Gomez said, her voice ringing clear through the courtroom. Soren Henderson's guardianship is terminated effective immediately, full rights and autonomy restored. I felt Arthur's hand on my shoulder, a brief squeeze of congratulation, but I couldn't take my eyes off Soren. My son's shoulders sagged forward as if a weight had physically lifted. Furthermore, I am ordering a formal criminal investigation into Anwen Cooper and Dr. Cedric Price. Bailiff, take him into custody. Arthur stood. Your Honor, we also request this court initiate emergency custody proceedings for Finn Henderson with temporary placement to his grandfather pending a full family court review. Judge Gomez nodded. I'm referring this to family court for an emergency hearing within 48 hours. In the interim, I'm ordering Child Protective Services to assess the child's current placement and report back to this court. Mr. Henderson, expect a social worker to contact you today. The gavel fell. Finn was coming home. Soren was free. And for the first time in 22 months, I saw my son smile. Arthur gathered his files, while bailiffs led Dr. Price and Anwen toward the holding area. Soren stood slowly testing his legs, as if he'd forgotten how to walk without permission. Let's go home, son, I said. We walked through the courthouse together. Father and son finally passed the security checkpoint, through the double doors into late afternoon sunlight. Soren stopped at the top of the courthouse steps, and I watched him close his eyes and tip his face toward the sky. 22 months since he'd felt sunshine without supervision. His hand shook when he reached for the railing. "Dad!" he said quietly, not looking at me. "There's something else? Something Anwen told me about Mom's trust right before the fall. She said Mom didn't just hide money, she hid evidence." His first smile in 22 months faded. Evidence of what Alice really knew before she died. Soren stood beside me at the security checkpoint, his revelation about Alice's evidence still hanging between us. But first, we needed to witness this, the end of Anwen's control, the beginning of accountability. A bailiff guided Anwen through the metal detector. Dr. Price followed 10 feet behind his expensive suit jacket, crumpled his physician's dignity stripped away by steel restraints. They were being processed for transfer to county jail, pending arraignment. Anwen's eyes found Soren across the lobby. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but a female bailiff placed a hand on her shoulder and guided her forward. I turned to my son. "You okay seeing her?" Soren watched Anwen disappear through the security doors, and his expression was eerily calm. "Yeah, she's just smaller than I remembered, less powerful. Anwen passed us in the hallway earlier, and I realized she'd always been a paper tiger, terrifying, only because we'd believed the roar." Thank you," I said. He shook Soren's hand, carefully mindful of the medication tremor. "Glad you're home, son." I placed my hand on Soren's shoulder. "We're going home." The drive to Henderson property took 18 minutes through late afternoon traffic. Soren sat in my truck's passenger seat, staring out the window at oak trees lining Miller Road scenery he hadn't seen in 22 months. His fingers drummed against his thigh, a nervous rhythm I recognized from his childhood. "How much has changed?" he asked quietly. "Not as much as you'd think. The workshop's exactly like you left it." I turned onto the gravel drive, and the workshop appeared through the pine trees, weathered cedar siding, metal roof, catching sunset light. Home. Soren climbed out slowly, testing his legs. I unlocked the workshop door and pushed it open, letting him enter first. The workshop smelled exactly like I remembered: oak and varnish and decades of Henderson hands shaping wood, and Soren breathed it in like oxygen after drowning. He stood in the doorway, taking inventory. Tools hung on the pegboard in the same arrangement. The half-finished rocking chair sat by the south window, waiting for sanding. His workbench occupied the east corner surface, scarred from years of projects. Soren crossed to the bench and ran his fingers over the wood grain, where he'd carved his initials at age 14 SH inside a rough rectangle. The letters were worn smooth from decades of his hands resting there while he worked. "You kept my bench exactly where it was," he said. "Never moved it. Kept thinking you'd walk back through that door and need it." His shoulders shook once, and I saw him wipe his eyes. "Can I?" His voice cracked. "Can I stay out here tonight? I don't think I can handle walls yet." "Course you can. I'll bring blankets and pillows. You take as much time as you need." I started a fire in the workshop stove and pulled ingredients from the kitchen cupboard: pumpkin cream thyme, the recipe Alice had perfected over 30 years of autumn evenings. The soup simmered, while Soren wandered the workshop, reacquainting himself with the geography of his childhood. By the time I ladled soup into 2 bowls, the workshop had filled with warmth and the golden light of oil lamps. Soren sat at the kitchen table, a pine surface I'd built the year he was born, and accepted the bowl with trembling hands. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Soren set down his spoon. "Do you still have that hand plane you gave me when I was 12? The one with the walnut handle?" "Course I do. It's been waiting for you, same as everything else." I retrieved the plane from the tool cabinet and placed it in his hands. The walnut handle gleamed with oil and use. I'd maintained every tool in the workshop with the same care I'd have given if Soren walked in tomorrow. Soren's fingers closed around the handle, and tears fell onto the curved wood. He didn't wipe them away. "For 2 years I held on to every memory of this place," he whispered. "The grain of the wood, the weight of the tools. It was the only way I knew to stay myself." My son had fought to preserve his identity against medication and isolation, consciously holding on to the memory of Henderson Workshop sawdust like a lifeline. I sat beside him and placed my hand over his. "You're home now, son. You're exactly who you've always been." We finished dinner. As the workshop darkened around us, 2 carpenters finally working in the same space again. Soren asked about Hugo, about the commission orders I'd completed, about whether the oak trees behind the property were still standing. After dinner, Soren pulled a folded paper from his pocket, creased and worn from 2 years of hiding. "Anwen dropped this the day of the fall. I grabbed it before the ambulance came." He smoothed it on the table, and I recognized Alice's handwriting immediately, a list of names, dates, and one phrase underlined twice. That Soren must know before guardianship expires. The social worker's sedan pulled up to the workshop at 9 in the morning, and through the window, I saw Finn's small face pressed against the glass, searching for the father he'd been told was too sick to see him. We'd stayed up past midnight examining Alice's document, trying to decode the names and dates she'd listed. But morning had arrived before we'd found answers, and now my grandson was here, the reunion we'd fought 22 months to make possible. Ms. Rebecca Dalton, a woman in her mid-40s with graying auburn hair and a county badge clipped to her blazer, helped Finn out of the car seat. She held his hand as they walked toward the workshop door. I opened the door before they knocked. "Mr. Henderson, I'm Rebecca Dalton from Child Protective Services. I have custody transfer papers for you to sign." "Come in, please." Finn stood in the doorway, one hand clutching Ms. Dalton's fingers, the other holding a small backpack decorated with cartoon dinosaurs. He was taller than I'd expected, 5 years old now, not the toddler I remembered. His dark hair fell across his forehead, exactly like Soren's had at that age. Soren sat in the rocking chair by the workshop stove, still using crutches for stability. He'd dressed carefully that morning, clean flannel shirt jeans, the effort visible in his trembling hands. Finn's eyes found his father, and for 3 heartbeats the boy just stared. Then recognition flooded his face like sunrise. "And Daddy." Finn dropped Ms. Dalton's hand and ran across the workshop floor. Soren let the crutches clatter to the ground and dropped to his knees, arms opening just in time to catch his son. "I'm here, buddy," Soren whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry I was gone. I tried every day to get back to you. Mama said you were sick, but you're here," Finn's words tumbled out. "She said you couldn't see me, but you're not sick." "I'm not sick. I was just stuck. But Grandpa found me. Grandpa brought me home." I turned away, giving them privacy, and found Ms. Dalton watching with professional composure that didn't quite hide the moisture in her eyes. "The papers," I said quietly. She pulled a folder from her briefcase and opened it on the workshop table. "Temporary custody granted to you, Mr. Henderson, with Soren, as co-guardian pending completion of his medical evaluation. Court date in 30 days to make it permanent." I signed where she indicated, and each signature felt like closing a door on Anwen's influence. Finn buried his face in Soren's shoulder and whispered something I couldn't hear, but I saw my son's tears and knew they were the first honest ones he'd cried in 2 years. Ms. Dalton gathered her paperwork. "I'll check in next week. If you need anything, counseling resources, medical referrals, call the number on the card." "Thank you," I said, walking her to the door. After she left, I stood on the workshop porch and listened through the open window to Soren's voice answering Finn's endless questions. Where had he been? Why couldn't he call? Could they go fishing like they used to? Each answer Soren gave was careful, age-appropriate, protecting his son from the full darkness. I gave them an hour before returning inside. Finn sat on Soren's lap in the rocking chair, both of them reading a picture book I'd kept on the workshop shelf. The Giving Tree, worn from hundreds of readings. Soren looked up at me, with Finn still wrapped around him, and mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." I nodded, no words needed. The next 2 weeks passed in a rhythm of healing breakfast at the workshop table, Finn playing with wood scraps, while Soren regained strength, afternoon walks to the creek, evening stories by the stove. Slowly, carefully, we rebuilt what Anwen had tried to destroy. On July 15th, I was sanding a commission piece while Soren helped Finn build a birdhouse. The workshop radio played low until the newsbreak interrupted. "Developing story out of Jackson County," the reporter said. "State investigators have expanded their probe into Pinewood Care Facility following revelations in the Henderson guardianship case. Investigators identified 12 additional cases at Pinewood Care Facility matching the pattern exposed in the Henderson case: questionable guardianships, communication restrictions, and billing irregularities." My hand stopped mid-stroke on the sandpaper. "All 12 patients are being independently reevaluated," the reporter continued. "Pinewood remains under state supervision pending the investigation's outcome, and facility CEO, Dr. Marcus Yates, is being questioned about his role in the alleged fraud. 12 other families, 12 other victims trapped in the same web we'd barely escaped." Soren crossed the workshop and turned up the radio volume. "As Dad, you hear that?" His voice was quiet but steady. 12 families. You didn't just save me." I set down the sandpaper and looked at my son, standing straighter now, color returning to his face, holding tools again, like the carpenter he'd always been. Behind him, Finn hammered carefully at his birdhouse tongue, sticking out in concentration. Your mother would have said this was worth every dollar of that trust, I said. Soren's eyes held mine. She'd be proud of you. Lawrence, we found something, he said without preamble. I've been reviewing Alice's trust documents with the forensic accountant. Alice didn't just set up the trust to fund the search. She structured it to trigger automatic investigations if Soren's guardianship lasted past his 35th birthday. I sank into the chair by the stove. What? There's a clause buried in the trust language. If Soren was under guardianship on his 35th birthday, that's August 14th next month, the trust would automatically file complaints with state regulators, adult protective services, and the State Bar Association. It's a dead man's switch. Arthur paused and I heard papers rustling. She knew Lawrence. Somehow Alice knew what Anwen was planning before she died. Arthur's revelation about Alice's trust had kept me awake most nights since she'd known somehow she'd known. But today was about gratitude, not mystery. Today was about thanking the man who'd started everything by refusing to walk away. The nurse at the 4th floor station directed me to room 427. I knocked softly and pushed the door open. Hugo lay in the hospital bed, with his right leg elevated in a complex brace, his left arm in a cast from elbow to wrist. The injuries from the Highway 26 crash had been severe, fractured femur, shattered ulna, 3 cracked ribs, concussion. But he was alive, and the doctor had said he'd walk again in 6 months. Mr. Henderson. Hugo said, his voice stronger than I'd expected. Didn't think I'd see you again. Had to come. I pulled a chair close to his bed and set the plaque on the table beside him. Soren's home, Finn's with his father, and it started because you handed me that package. Hugo's eyes found the plaque, and I saw him read his name carved into the wood. That's fine work. It's a thank you. Not enough, but it's what I know how to make. Didn't hand you nothing you weren't supposed to get, Mr. Henderson. That's just doing the job right. You did more than your job, Hugo. You saw something wrong at that farmer's market and you could have ignored it, could have walked away. Instead, you gave me the first real lead I'd had in 22 months. Hugo's hands were bandaged from the crash, and I realized he'd traded his ability to drive for my ability to find my son, a transaction he'd never agreed to, but bore without complaint. Oh, how's the recovery? I asked. Slow, physical therapy 3 times a week. Doctor says I can try crutches in another month. He gestured to his injured arm. Won't be driving postal routes for a while. They keeping your job? Union says yes, light duty when I'm cleared, sorting mail desk work. He paused. It's enough. I got insurance, got savings, and I got to be part of something that mattered. No regret, no bitterness about the cost. Just quiet acceptance that helping had been worth the price. That Soren wants to meet you, I said. When you're up for visitors, we'd like to bring Finn by, show you what your courage gave back to us. Hugo's eyes glistened, but he blinked the moisture away. I'd like that. I stayed another 20 minutes telling him about the trial, about the arrests, about the 12 other families being freed from Pinewood. Hugo listened with the same steady attention he'd given me that Saturday morning at the farmer's market present, engaged, caring about outcomes that didn't directly affect him. You're a good man, Hugo, I said as I stood to leave. It just did what anybody should have done. Most people don't. That's what makes it matter. 6 weeks after the trial, on the first morning of August, Soren stood at his workbench with the hand plane in his hands. His palms were soft, from 2 years without calluses, his grip uncertain, his stance hesitant. Finn played in the corner with wooden blocks I'd cut for him, building towers and knocking them down with delighted giggles. Ready to try? I asked. Soren nodded and positioned the plane against a piece of oak I'd clamped to the bench. His first stroke was tentative, the blade skipping, rather than cutting, leaving a jagged mark instead of a smooth curl. My hands forgot how to do this, he said quietly. 2 years, and they forgot. Watching Soren's uncertain hands on the plane was like watching a river remember its course after drought, hesitant at first, then finding the groove worn deep by memory. It would remembers even when hands don't, I said. We'll work slow, let it teach you again. Soren tried another stroke. This time the blade caught properly and a thin curl of oak peeled away from the board. Not perfect, but progress. I stood beside him, adjusting his grip slightly, showing him the angle I'd taught him 20 years ago, when he was barely taller than this workbench. The workshop smelled like fresh shavings and linseed oil, the morning light slanting through the east windows, exactly as it had when he was 12. It's coming back, I said. Soren made another pass with the plane. The curl was smoother this time, more confident. Finn looked up from his blocks. Grandpa, can I learn too? Daddy said you taught him when he was little. 3 generations, the legacy continuing. Anwen had tried to sever the Henderson line, but here was proof she'd failed completely. I crossed to Finn and lifted him up, settling him on my hip. Your daddy was 7 when I gave him his first lesson. You're 5. Think you can wait 2 more years. Can I just watch today? You can do better than watch. You can help. I set Finn down beside Soren at the workbench and handed him a piece of sandpaper. Start learning how wood feels. That's where everything begins. Soren watched his son run small fingers over the oak board's surface, feeling the grain, discovering the texture. My son's eyes met mine over Finn's head, and I saw gratitude and healing and the slow return of hope. We worked together for an hour, grandfather, father, and son, 3 generations learning and relearning the Henderson tradition. Soren's strokes grew steadier with each pass of the plane. Finn's questions came in an endless stream, and I stood between them more teaching and remembering, watching my family knit itself back together, one shaving at a time. That afternoon, Arthur Long arrived at the workshop with a leather portfolio under his arm and an expression I couldn't quite read. Lawrence, you need to see this. Alice wrote a letter to be opened only after Soren was found and freed. He handed me a sealed envelope, her handwriting on the front, to my husband. Now you know why. Inside was the truth about what she'd discovered before she died. Arthur's call came on a Thursday morning in September, while I was watching Soren teach Finn how to measure twice and cut once, and his first words were, "It's over. Anwen pled guilty." I stepped away from the workshop window and pressed the phone tighter to my ear. Say that again. Anwen Cooper, 12 years eligible for parole at 8. Dr. Price got 4 with permanent revocation of medical license. They both pled guilty. Anwen had pled guilty. No trial, no forcing Soren to relive the testimony, no making Finn hear the details of what his mother had done. For the first time since I'd met her, Anwen had accepted accountability for her actions. 12 years, I said. That's longer than Soren was gone. Judge threw the book at her. Financial exploitation of vulnerable adults, guardianship, fraud conspiracy to file false documents, unlawful detention. The prosecutor said the case file was airtight after Soren's testimony. She had no choice but to plead. Through the workshop window, I watched Soren guide Finn's small hands on the pruning shears, teaching him how to cut dead branches from Alice's apple tree, the one she'd planted the year Soren was born. My son moved with confidence now, his hands remembering their strength. How do you feel? Arthur asked. Like I can breathe again. 12 years sounded like justice until I realized Soren would be 47 when Anwen walked free older than I was when Alice died, and suddenly the numbers felt both too much and not enough. Your work was done in June, Lawrence, Arthur said gently. The legal system just needed time to catch up. Thank you, Arthur, for everything. You did the hard part. I just filed the paperwork. After we hung up, I stood in the workshop doorway, watching Soren lift Finn onto his shoulders so the boy could reach the higher branches. Finn's laughter echoed across the property, pure and uncomplicated, the sound of a childhood that wasn't being stolen. I felt closure but not triumph, not gloating, just the quiet certainty that the fight was finally finished. Soren saw me watching and raised his hand in a question. I gave him a thumbs up and mouthed the word, later. He nodded and returned his attention to Finn, patient and present, teaching his son the way I'd taught him. The Henderson tradition unbroken. 6 weeks later in October, Saskia Brennan visited the workshop in daylight for the first time. She'd always come at night before, scared, furtive, risking everything. Now she walked through the door at 10 in the morning, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing a smile that reached her eyes. "Mr. Henderson," she said, setting the coffee on the workshop table. "You look good." So do you. Heard they granted you immunity. Full immunity for cooperation with the investigation. Turns out my testimony helped convict not just Anwen and Dr. Price, but 6 other staff members at Pinewood. She pulled out a chair and sat down. I'm working with a nonprofit now, Oregon Guardianship Alliance. We're establishing oversight protocols, so what happened to Soren can't happen again. How do you thank someone for risking their career to save a stranger's son? That's good work, I said, sitting across from her. Your case is the foundation of our reform guidelines. The documentation, the patterns we identified, the way the system failed at every checkpoint. She pulled a folder from her bag. We're writing policy recommendations for the state legislature. I was hoping you'd speak publicly about what you went through. Your story could change laws. Soren appeared in the workshop doorway, wood shavings in his hair, Finn on his hip. He recognized Saskia immediately and crossed to shake her hand. "You saved my life," he said simply. Saskia's eyes filled with tears. "I just told the truth. That's all it took." She composed herself and returned her attention to me. "Will you speak congressional hearings, media, interviews the documentary filmmakers who've been calling—" I looked at the folder on the table, policy recommendations built on our family's trauma laws, written in the ink of our suffering. It mattered. It would help people, but it wasn't ours to carry forward. "Use the other 12 families, Saskia," I said. "Their stories need telling more than ours. We got our son back. Not all of them were so lucky." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Alice's letter said you'd say that. She wrote you'd want privacy once it was over. She knew you well. Alice had predicted this moment too. Her final act of protection wasn't just the trust or the dead man's switch, but shielding us from the media storm that would follow the case's resolution." "She always did," I said quietly. Saskia gathered her folder and stood. "The offer stands if you change your mind. But I understand. Some victories don't need witnesses." Soren walked her to the door while I stayed at the table, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Through the window, I watched Finn playing in the sawdust pile, building castles with wood scraps, and his imagination intact. We'd won. The family was whole. The law had delivered justice. And Alice had known from the very beginning exactly how it would end. After Saskia left, Soren found me in the workshop, holding Alice's letter again, the one Arthur had brought weeks ago. He read over my shoulder, past the part about the trust structure, to the final paragraph I'd avoided reading aloud. "Lawrence, I'm dying, knowing I can't stop what's coming, but I can give you the tools to finish it. The trust isn't just money, it's proof. When you find him, you'll understand." Soren's hand rested on my shoulder. "What proof, Dad?" I looked down at Alice's handwriting, steady, deliberate, loving, even in its final message. "I don't know yet," I said, "but I think it's time we found out." November brought Oregon winter to the workshop, and on an evening when rain drummed the roof, I watched Finn fall asleep against Soren's shoulder, 3 generations under one roof, for the first time since Alice died. We'd discovered Alice's proof in October, working through the trust documents with Arthur. The proof wasn't hidden evidence, it was the trust structure itself, meticulously documented, creating a paper trail that became legal ammunition. Alice had built us a weapon disguised as inheritance. But tonight wasn't about fighting. Tonight was about healing. Dinner dishes sat washed beside the workshop sink. The fire in the stove crackled low, casting orange light across the kitchen table, where Soren and I sat with coffee growing cold. Finn's small chest rose and fell against his father's shoulder, one hand still clutching the wooden truck he'd been playing with. "I should put him down," Soren said quietly, but he didn't move. "No rush," I said. The rain intensified, hammering the metal roof in a rhythm I'd heard 10,000 times. This workshop had weathered 40 years of Oregon storms. It would weather 40 more. Soren adjusted Finn's weight carefully, then looked at me across the table. "Dad, were there days in there? I thought maybe I really was going crazy, that maybe Anwin was right and I was the problem." "Probably," I said. "Gaslighting works even when you know intellectually it's false. That's what makes it effective." There was one morning, maybe 6 months in, when I woke up and couldn't remember Finn's birthday. Just blank. And I thought, this is it. This is how they win. They make you forget who you are piece by piece until there's nothing left. His voice stayed steady, but his free hand gripped the coffee mug tighter. I had to repeat his birthday 50 times before my brain would hold on to it again. September 22nd. September 22nd. Soren's question hung in the workshop air like sawdust after a cut unavoidable, needing time to settle before you could see clearly again. "Just because people call truth an illusion doesn't mean the truth changes," I said. "You knew who you were underneath it all. That's why you fought to remember the workshop smell. That's why you grabbed Anwin's document before the ambulance came. Some part of you never stopped knowing the truth. How did you keep believing I was alive when everyone said I was dead? How did you hold on to that and, vai que se passa?" I looked at the fire, watching flames dance around half-burned oak. "Your mother's letter, the one from the cemetery. She wrote, 'Our son needs you.' Present tense, not past, needs. Like she knew something I didn't. Maybe she did. Yeah, maybe she did." We sat in comfortable silence, listening to rain and fire and Finn's soft breathing. Outside, wind rattled the workshop windows, but inside, we were warm and safe and together. "I'm glad you didn't give up," Soren said finally. "I'm glad you held on." Later that week, after Finn had returned to his own bed and Soren had gone to the main house for the night, I sat alone at Alice's old desk, the same one Anwen had searched 6 times looking for leverage. I sat at Alice's desk where Anwen had rifled through drawers looking for secrets and realized my wife had left the only secret that mattered: faith that I'd finish what she started. The desk was cherry wood hand-built by my father in 1962 as a wedding gift. The surface was scarred from decades of use. Pen marks, water rings the corner, where she'd once knocked over a bottle of ink. I pulled open the bottom drawer and found the stationery Alice had always kept there. Cream-colored paper with no decoration, just good weight and clean lines. She'd used it for important correspondence, birth announcements, thank you notes, the letter to Soren she'd written before she died. I took a single sheet and uncapped my fountain pen. The words came slowly, carefully, like planing a difficult piece of wood. "Alice, I did what you asked. I fought for our son. Soren is home. Finn is sleeping in the next room. The workshop is still here." I paused, listening to the rain, feeling her absence like a physical weight. "You gave me the tools to finish what you couldn't stop. The trust wasn't just money, it was your last act of protecting this family. You built us a roadmap through the darkness, and I followed it all the way to Pinewood Care Facility, all the way to that courtroom, all the way to bringing our son home." The pen moved across the paper, and I felt 8 years of grief pouring out through ink. "I found the document you left, the one with Soren's guardianship timeline. I found the dead man's switch in the trust. I found the bank key. Every piece you left behind I used. You were right about Anwen. You were right about needing proof. You were right about everything." I took a breath and added the final line. "You were right about one thing I never believed until now. I am stronger than I thought. Thank you for knowing that when I didn't." I signed it simply Lawrence. The letter sat on the desk for a long moment, and I stared at my own handwriting, shakier than Alice's had been, less elegant but honest. Then I folded the paper carefully, creasing it the way Alice used to fold letters, and opened the bottom drawer again. The bank key was there, the one from Alice's trust discovery, the one that had unlocked the safe deposit box containing documentation of Anwen's first attempt to access Soren's inheritance. Physical proof of premeditation. Physical proof of Alice's foresight. I placed my letter beside the key, grief finding its rightful place beside gratitude, and closed the drawer. Outside, the rain continued. Inside, the fire burned low. And somewhere in the space between what was lost and what remained, I felt Alice's presence like a hand on my shoulder. "We made it," I whispered to the empty workshop. "All of us. We made it home." The next morning, Soren found the letter in the drawer. I'd left it unsealed. He read it quietly, then looked up with tears in his eyes. "Dad, I want to write one too, to Mom, to tell her I made it home." I handed him the good stationery, and we sat together at Alice's desk, both writing letters to someone who already knew we'd survived. The radio announcement came on a December morning, while Soren and I were planing oak for Finn's first toolbox. Pinewood Care Center had officially closed license, permanently revoked. We'd written our letters to Alice together that November morning, father and son side by side at her desk, both finding words for grief and gratitude. Soren's letter was shorter than mine, but every line had weight. He'd folded it carefully and placed it beside mine in the drawer where they rested now, not hidden, just home. I turned up the radio volume. "The state has officially revoked Pinewood Care Center's license. All 12 patients identified in the Henderson investigation have been transferred to independent facilities with court oversight. Oregon legislators are drafting a guardianship reform bill requiring annual reviews and mandatory independent evaluations." Soren set down his plane and stared at the radio. 12 people, he said quietly. 12 families who didn't have an Alice Henderson building them a trust, who didn't have a Lawrence Henderson refusing to believe the death certificate. "You helped expose it," I said. "Your testimony opened the investigation." "That's not enough." He turned to face me, and I saw determination that reminded me of Alice. "Dad, I want to do something for those people. When you get help like we did, you pass it on. That's what Mom would have said." Soren's voice saying, "pass it on," sounded exactly like Alice had, same cadence, same certainty. And I realized my wife lived on in more than letters and trust documents. "You're right," I said. "That's exactly what Alice would have said." Saskia mentioned they need advocates, people who understand the system from the inside, people who've lived it. He picked up the plane again, running his thumb along the blade edge. I'm not ready yet, but maybe in 6 months, a year, when I'm stronger. I looked at my son, 35 years old, rediscovering himself piece by piece after 22 months of someone else trying to erase him. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was finding purpose beyond the trauma. When you're ready, I said, I'll help however I can. We worked in comfortable silence, the rhythm of planes on wood filling the workshop with a sound that had echoed through 3 generations. 3 weeks later, on a late December evening, when light snow began falling, Finn stood at the workbench with Soren's hands guiding his on the plane. The boy was 6 now, tall enough to reach the bench with only a small stool, old enough to understand the importance of keeping fingers clear of the blade. I sat in the rocking chair by the stove, with coffee, watching my son teach my grandson the way I'd taught him. Keep the pressure even, Soren said softly. Let the blade do the work, don't force it. Finn's tongue stuck out in concentration as he made the stroke, and a thin curl of oak peeled away. His face lit up with pride. I did it. You did. Now do it again. 50 times, then we'll check if it's smooth. Finn's small hand under Soren's on the plane looked like all the generations before Henderson hands, shaping wood, shaping boys, shaping men who knew how to hold both tools and truth. After 10 strokes, Finn looked over his shoulder at me. Grandpa, tell me a story. What kind of story? About building, about grandpa things. I smiled and set down my coffee. Once there was a carpenter who learned something more important than good wood or straight joints, or even time itself. What did he learn? Finn asked, turning to face me fully. That it's the person standing next to you when you're planing that matters. Not the wood, not the technique. That person. I gestured to Soren. Your daddy is teaching you carpentry, but what matters isn't the toolbox you're making. It's that he's here standing next to you showing you how. Finn processed this with childhood seriousness, then nodded. Like how you're here watching us? Exactly like that. Soren's eyes met mine over Finn's head, and we shared understanding that needed no words. The snow continued falling as evening darkened into night. We finished Finn's lesson and ate dinner at the workshop table, soup and bread, simple and warm. Finn fell asleep on the sofa by the stove, and Soren carried him to the cot in the corner, covering him with the quilt Alice had made 30 years ago. I'm going to turn in too, Soren said quietly. You staying up? For a bit. New Year's Eve thoughts. He squeezed my shoulder and headed to the loft. I heard the creak of floorboards above, then silence except for the fire crackling and wind pushing snow against windows. I pulled on my coat and stepped onto the workshop porch. The world was white, and still snow falling in fat flakes that caught the light from the windows. The oak trees were dark silhouettes against gray sky, unchanged from the day I'd bought this land 50 years ago. Alice knew it was coming and left me the tools. Hugo risked his body. Saskia risked her career. Clifford stood when others walked away. Arthur fought when I couldn't, and Soren, my son, never forgot who he was underneath all those lies. I'd made a choice 2 years ago when I received Alice's letter at the cemetery. I could have accepted the death certificate, could have believed the convenient fiction and moved on. It would have been easier, but I'd chosen truth over convenience, chosen to fight when fighting meant spending every dollar of Alice's trust, risking my own competency hearing, facing Anwin's lawyers, and a system designed to protect guardians instead of victims. Things once lost can't be recovered unchanged. Soren would always carry Pinewood's scars. I would always carry the weight of those 22 months. Finn would always know his mother tried to steal his father. But things taken wrongly can be found if you're willing to pay truth's price. I'd paid. I'd do it again. The snow kept falling peaceful and relentless, covering the driveway and the workshop roof, and the garden, where Alice's apple tree stood dormant until spring. I turned from the porch and stepped back into the warm workshop where my son and grandson slept. The door closed behind me with the same solid click it had made for 40 years, unchanged, dependable home. Outside, the snow kept falling on a world that had tried to take everything and failed. And to you listening to my story, remember this truth has a price, but lies cost everything. Looking back, I wish I'd seen the signs earlier. Anwin's too perfect performance, the way she isolated Soren after Alice got sick, how quickly she had answers for every question. Family betrayal is the hardest to see because you're not looking for it. I wanted to believe the best. That trust nearly cost me my son forever. Don't make my mistake when something feels wrong, it probably is. Trust your instincts, even when everyone tells you you're crazy. The hardest lesson I learned is that family betrayal doesn't announce itself. It comes quietly wrapped in concern and care, hiding behind smiles. Anwin spent years positioning herself as the devoted wife, the caring daughter-in-law. By the time I realized the truth, she'd stolen 22 months from my son. But I also learned that standing up for truth, no matter how impossible, is always worth it. God put Alice's letter in my hands for a reason. He gave me the strength to keep searching when logic said quit. That faith in truth brought my family home. If this story moved you, I'd be grateful if you'd leave a comment, sharing your thoughts. Have you ever faced family betrayal or fought for someone when the world said, stop? Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Revenge Dad. Your support means everything. These stories matter because you're here listening. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time is valuable, and I'm honored you spent it here with me. One final note. While this story includes some fictional elements for privacy and storytelling, the lessons about truth, family, and perseverance are very real.